Researcher at the MIT Media Lab, part of the Opera of the Future group, and my research focuses on the relationship people have with their own voice and with the voices of others. I study what we can learn from listening to voices from the various fields, from neurology to biology, cognitive sciences, linguistics. In our group we create tools and experiences to help people gain a better applied understanding of their voice in order to reduce the biases, to become better listeners, to create more healthy relationship, or just to understand themselves better. And this really has to come with a holistic approach on the voice. Because think about all the applications and implications that the voice may have, as we discover more about it. Your voice is a very complex phenomenon. It requires a synchronization of more than 100 muscles in your body. And by listening to the voice, we can understand possible failures of what happens inside. For example, listening to very specific types of turbulences and nonlinearity of the voice can help predict very early stages of Parkinson's just through a phone call. Listening to the breathness of the voice can help detect heart disease. And we also know that the changes of tempo inside individual words is a very good marker of depression.
As an individual caught selling a large quantity of drugs in my late teens, I knew firsthand the power of opportunity as opposed to the wrath of the criminal justice system. Along the way, with the help and guidance of my district attorney, my supervisor and judges, I learned the power of the prosecutor to change lives instead of ruining them. And that's how we do it in Boston. We helped a woman who was arrested for stealing groceries to feed her kids get a job. Instead of putting an abused teenager in adult jail for punching another teenager, we secured mental health treatment and community supervision. A runaway girl who was arrested for prostituting, to survive on the streets, needed a safe place to live and grow, something we could help her with. I even helped a young man who was so afraid of the older gang kids showing up after school, that one morning instead of a lunchbox into his backpack, he put a loaded 9mm. We would spend our time that we'd normally take prepping our cases for months and months for trial down the road by coming up with real solutions to the problems as they presented. Which is the better way to spend our time? How would you prefer your prosecutors to spend theirs? Why are we spending $80 billion on a prison industry that we know is failing, when we could take that money and reallocate it into education, into mental health treatment, into substance abuse treatment, and to community investment so we can develop our neighborhoods?
For too long, discussions about climate change have been about sacrifice. I am here to tell you that climate solutions actually make a better city and a better quality of life for everyone. This is only the first of 5 lessons we have learned on our journey to become an emission-free city. And I think these lessons can be applied almost anywhere. So I like to share them. So lesson number 1, confronting climate change is about creating better cities and better quality of life for everyone, including those kids in the kindergarten, that don't have to share their days with noisy excavators. The second lesson is about being ambitious. In 2015, the City Council set a target of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 95% by 2030 without purchasing any carbon offsets. So aiming for real reductions. Commitment to this goal changed our mindset. If we were going to reach this target, every department had to get active, figure out measures and finding out how to implement them. So second lesson, be ambitious. A target measured in years, not decades, provides no excuse for inaction.
But what exactly happens to your body when you're in a coma? First, we have to be clear that comas are very different from sleep, despite the fact that the origin of the word comes from the Greek for coma or deep sleep. Comas are not sleep, however, and are instead various forms of unconsciousness that render a person unable to respond to any external stimuli. You can play the loudest, heaviest death metal in the world right next to someone who's comatose, and you won't succeed in doing anything except really annoying the neighbors. Likewise, you can even physically hurt people in a coma, and they will remain completely oblivious and unresponsive. In times in the not-too-distant past, this was sometimes used as treatment, with doctors trying to shock their victims back into consciousness. Everything was tried, from exposing parts of the body to open flames, to severely dropping the body's temperature with ice, to even bloodletting from the head directly. One treatment even included wholly emptying the stomach. We guess because the doctors thought that if a patient got hungry enough, the body would force them to wake up. Or maybe they really were just throwing everything, including the kitchen sink, at the problem, which we're sure was also tried. Comas can occur as a result of serious trauma or as a deliberate medical treatment by doctors. They are typically brought on by traumatic head injury, and it's believed that it's the brain's way of shutting down so it can focus on repairing itself. They can also, however, be brought on by a stroke or a brain tumor, drug or alcohol abuse, or an illness such as diabetes or infection. Most of the time, a coma only lasts a few weeks though, but past this period, the patient can enter a persistent vegetative
Sometimes ignorance is preferable to the detailed truth. Maybe we only care about truth insofar as it empowers us. Knowing and thinking about all of the details of every orange tree would just be a psychological burden for the most of us. I'll take illusion over the reality. But I can't help but ask, is it possible that the mind is actually accessing a deeper kind of truth? Maybe the mind is separating the signal from the noise. But what constitutes signal versus noise? Our values. A farmer that values knowing all the details of an orange tree will view it differently than a regular person. Well, where do our values come from? Here's Nietzsche's view from Beyond Good and Evil. Behind all logic and its seeming sovereignty of movement, there too stand valuations, or more clearly, physiological demands for the preservation of a certain type of life. For Nietzsche, our values come from our physiological demands. And what does our physiology demand? Power. It wants to survive and thrive. What does it mean to thrive?